I'm Aria, a 38-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, Aaron, who is 2 years older, and our high school daughter, Jessica. We had been living in an apartment for a long time, but 5 years ago, we built a house and moved to the town we live in now. Having achieved my dream of owning a home, surrounded by a loving husband and a sweet daughter, I was spending my days full of happiness. However, I had one concern. It was about our neighborly relationships. A middle-aged woman named Stephanie, who lived next door, loved gossiping about others. Gossip lovers exist everywhere, but she was clearly excessive. Desperate to know about other families' affairs, thanks to her, my family got caught in a terrifying trouble. Stephanie, who appeared to be around 50, had been living in this town since childhood. She knew everything about who lived where, who married whom, and when children were born in the neighborhood. She loved to chat and immediately started talking to me when we had just moved in, asking where we came from. I was happy to have someone friendly when we didn't know anyone else, and she would give us small gifts and take care of us, so at first, I had a good impression of her. I thought it was nice to have a kind neighbor. But over time, I started finding her behavior annoying. Stephanie seemed to be obsessed with our family's affairs, prying into even private matters. Questions like whether my daughter had a boyfriend could be laughed off, but when she asked about our savings and my husband's salary, I was taken aback. When I said I don't like to answer about money, she pursed her lips and said, "Why so secretive between neighbors?" No matter how much she sulked, I kept silent. It's incredibly inappropriate to ask someone directly about their savings. Additionally, there was another reason I didn't want to share secrets with her. Not only did she ask questions, but she would also spread the information she got from me to others immediately. I was shocked multiple times when things I told only her spread throughout the neighborhood in no time. And yet, she never talked about herself. The only thing I knew was that her husband was so busy he was rarely home. The rest of her private life remained a mystery. It's unfair how she wants to know everything about others but reveals nothing about herself. Because of this, I gradually started to dislike her and limited our conversations to minimal greetings when we met outside. For a while, she kept pressing me, but eventually, she seemed to realize I was avoiding her and stopped approaching me. To an outsider, it might seem cold to act distant despite living next door. But to protect my and my family's privacy, keeping a distance was necessary. For a while, we lived peacefully without any incidents. One morning, when I went to take out the trash, I ran into Stephanie, who was just leaving her house. We locked eyes, and I felt a jolt, but I greeted her with a simple good morning and tried to pass by. However, she grabbed my arm, saying, "Aria, wait a minute." Oh no, caught again. I sighed internally. What could she want to ask during the busy morning? Unlike my gloomy self, she was grinning. Despite her smile, she said with a voice full of spite, "I heard your husband got promoted recently? I'm so envious." Her words sent chills down my spine. My husband's promotion was a recent event. We hadn't told Stephanie or anyone else in the neighborhood. The only ones who knew were his boss and our family. As I stood frozen, she continued to strike. "With that hefty raise, you don't even need to work part-time, do you?" She spat these words and left. Once again, I was stunned. Not only did Stephanie know about the promotion, but she also knew I was considering part-time work. Feeling uneasy, I reported this to my husband that night when he came home from work. I asked if he had mentioned the promotion to anyone, but he confirmed he hadn't. We were both baffled about how Stephanie found out. Just then, we heard hurried footsteps rushing down the stairs, and our daughter Jessica burst into the living room. Breathless, she said, "Come to my room right now." I tried to calm her down, asking, "What's wrong? Why are you so frantic?" But she insisted, "Just come quickly," pulling us by our arms. Following her upstairs, we entered her room. Jessica pointed under her bed. "Mom, Dad, look at this." There, under the bed, partially hidden, was a white power strip plugged into an outlet. At first, I didn't understand why Jessica was making such a fuss. To me, it just looked like a normal power strip. But my husband and Jessica had turned pale. Then, my husband said something shocking.
"This is a bugging device."
Hearing the word bugging device, I almost screamed, but my husband motioned for silence, so I quickly covered my mouth. I had only imagined bugging devices as special equipment, so it still looked like an ordinary power strip to me. However, Jessica, having just seen a drama with a similar device, immediately recognized it. We quickly searched online and found many bugging devices that looked just like the one in Jessica's room. Who, when, and how did someone set up such a thing? My husband and I both thought of the same person, but as we were thinking, the culprit was probably listening to our conversation through the device. We decided to leave Jessica's room and return to the living room. According to Jessica, there was no device when she cleaned her room and moved the bed 3 days ago. So, it must have been set up very recently. However, we hadn't let anyone other than family into the house for the past month, so it must have been done by someone breaking in from outside. I felt both fear and anger boiling up. No matter the reason, invading my daughter's room and planting a bugging device was unforgivable. My husband felt the same. So, we decided to set a trap to catch the culprit. Well, if you're ready for this. No mercy. That night, we had Jessica sleep in another room, and my husband and I got to work. In hindsight, we should have hired a professional, and I regret our recklessness now. But at that moment, we were too enraged to wait. To lure the culprit, we set up a trick to make them think the bugging device was malfunctioning. We placed crumpled newspaper next to the device and directed a strong fan at it to create constant rustling noise. After setting the trap, my husband hid in Jessica's bed, and I waited in the adjacent room. We waited for the culprit to arrive. In the end, our plan succeeded. The culprit fell for the trap and came to check the device. According to my husband, it took less than an hour for noises to start outside the room. He jumped out of the bed and opened the curtains to see a man standing on the balcony. The man tried to flee, but my husband quickly tackled him on the balcony, immobilizing him. When my husband turned on the flashlight to see the man's face, he was shocked. The eavesdropper turned out to be Stephanie's son. I also rushed over from the next room when I heard a noise on the balcony and was astonished to see him after so many years. Stephanie had always said her son was brilliant, went to university out of the prefecture after high school, and landed a job at a top-tier company. So why was he here? Moreover, his once fresh-faced appearance was gone. He looked haggard and even had a scruffy beard. What could have happened? My husband and I were puzzled. My husband asked,
"Are you the one who planted the bug?"
He nodded silently. Apparently resigned, Stephanie's son offered no resistance, hung his head quietly, and had tears in his eyes. My husband was exasperated by his demeanor.
If you're going to cry, why did you try to bug our house?
With a small voice, he began to speak. According to him, he had graduated from university and found a job at a fairly large company, but he couldn't adapt to the workplace and quit after just 1 month. He returned to his parents' house and, instead of job hunting or even getting a part-time job, spent his days playing games. He thought he was resting his tired body and mind, but in reality, he was just a recluse. He stayed home all day and only went out late at night, so my husband and I had no idea he was living next door. Finally, we understood why Stephanie never wanted to talk about her home life. As for why he tried to bug our house, it was because his mother instructed him to. She was obsessed with our family and told her reclusive son, "If you succeed, I'll give you some spending money." So, he planted the bug. My daughter had sometimes slept with the window open on hot nights, and he took advantage of this, climbing up from the garden shed to the balcony to enter the room. His only goal was to plant the bug, but it was terrifying to think what could have happened if he had intended to harm her. I was very close to my daughter and often chatted with her in her room. He listened in on those conversations and learned about my husband's promotion and my plans to start a part-time job. He came to check the bug when he heard strange noises and couldn't hear voices anymore, thinking the device was broken. It was already past 1 a.m., but after hearing his story, my husband and I took him to Stephanie's house and rang the intercom. No one answered for a while, but after multiple rings, Stephanie responded irritably. "Who is it at this hour?" I spoke to the camera. "Your son was caught sneaking onto our balcony, so we brought him here." Stephanie hurriedly came to the door in her pajamas. Seeing us and her son standing together, she was initially shocked but then put on a defiant expression. "What do you want at this late hour?" She feigned ignorance, which angered my husband.
Your son planted a bug in our daughter's room. Don't pretend you didn't know.
Stephanie remained unfazed. "A bug? I don't know anything about that." She laughed dismissively and turned away. I was appalled by her brazen attitude, but then she shocked us further. "He did it on his own. It has nothing to do with me." She abandoned her own son. He looked devastated. Seeing him so sad and silent, we felt a bit sorry for him, but a crime is a crime. "We'll be filing a police report." "Go ahead, do whatever you want." She still acted like it was someone else's problem. Then I added, "We'll also report this to your husband." She turned pale. "Please, don't tell my husband." She clung to me, begging. It seemed her husband was very strict. According to her son, he was fed up with her gossiping and had moved out a few years ago, tired of her behavior. She had lied about him being busy with work. Their marriage was failing. Despite this, he still supported her and their son financially. If he found out about this, it would likely be the final straw. If they divorced, Stephanie, a stay-at-home mom, would be out on the streets. She begged us not to tell her husband, but my husband and I were not lenient. "We heard everything from your son. Paying your child to bug someone else's house is despicable. Both of you need to atone for your actions." We left her house. A few days later, Stephanie's husband visited us. After calling the contact number given by their son, he came to apologize. He apologized for his son's actions and even paid us compensation. insisting he would recover it from Stephanie. It was our first time meeting him, and he seemed very reasonable, unlike Stephanie. We felt a bit sad thinking that their son might have turned out better living with him. But crimes can't be undone. He was arrested for trespassing and fined. Despite being young, he had a criminal record, but it was his own doing, even if he was coerced by his mother. Shortly after, Stephanie and her husband divorced. The neighborhood quickly learned of the scandal, and unable to bear the shame, Stephanie left town. No one knows where she went, but her son remains a recluse, likely living a miserable life in hiding with his mother. As for us, we used this incident as a lesson to improve our home's security. We are determined to protect our daughter and ensure we never face such a crime again. Goodbye, everyone. How was this story? Please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.